fly out to support their team versus
The
France.
flight took, that is the most unnewsworthy headline on
Exactly.
BBC News I have ever seen.
Exactly.
Morocco fans heartbreak as Doha flights cancelled is the top story on BBC. Um, that means that there's no non-tech news. Okay, so good. So we're doing tech news. Which number are you on? Let's see. You were talking about
Okay.
last. So that's number four, five.
Elan Jet at Elan Jet was suspended.
Oh, the Twitter account.
Yes,
Well, that's why he bought Twitter, was to suspend that
maybe.
account. Yeah. Okay. Let me start the. I just started the live stream just for kicks and giggles. Let's do the air horn and just for tradition. And I guess you did the Apple plans to allow third-party app stores. They have.
Yes.
Mark
Quickly,
Gurman's got
yes.
sources over there at Bloomberg, and Alibaba will not be able to buy ARM's high-performance chips because of the U.S. Block on China with everything to do with chips. U.S. Commerce Department plans to put Chinese memory chip maker on its entry list, banning that. So again, another day, another Chinese tech company getting banned. And then responding to the Twitter files, Jack Dorsey criticizes attacks on Twitter staff, advocates for an open social media protocol, and commits $1 million a year to Signal. SBF's carelessness, fraud, defense after misrepresenting risk management and funneling customer money to Alameda is a confession the SEC sees straight through. Good. Yeah, and they should. Platformer says they have sources. Twitter is considering forcing all users to opt in to personalized ads and share their location data, but may let blue users opt out of personalized ads. Okay. And New York Times says they have sources that Twitter stopped paying rent on offices and is considering not paying severance packages to cut costs as its top lawyer, Alex Spiro, leaves the company. Twitter suspends Elon Jet, a popular bot that tracked Elon's private jet, days after its creator accused Twitter of shadow banning the account. So, I have a question. Couldn't Mr. Elon Musk, this jet that's being tracked, right? There's a jet, it's being tracked. It's believed, and Ben might know the answer to this. Thank God. So is Ben with us?
My ears are pricked. I'm ready to go.
Here we go,
Let's
Ben.
hear it.
I think you know the question. Could not Elon have a different jet that this kid doesn't know about, and then takes advantage of this Twitter account to essentially create false information on his quote unquote primary jet is being tracked going here or there or wherever, and Elon could use that jet just to confuse people, and then he has his real jet, which actually goes to real places.
So he could definitely have a jet to confuse people. The whether or not he could mask his ownership or involvement with another jet, I don't know. It'll be being tracked through something called ADSB, which is a digital data exchange where aeroplanes broadcast digitally their position. I don't know the exact flight rules in the US for registration of flight plans and when you have to register a flight plan. I think an aircraft of that class and the type of trips you do probably has to register a flight plan, but I'm not sure. In the UK, you only have to register a flight plan if you're leaving the country. Well, there's various conditions with a private aircraft. But one of them will be leaving the country. So for a domestic flight, I don't know if anybody else in the room knows the I can't even remember the name of your FAA rules better than I do. Then let me know. But domestic flights, I'm not sure. International flights, I think you'd find it very hard. You have to register a flight plan and so forth. So I don't really know whether he could. I'm sure that if the plane was registered under some kind of cryptic company name or whatever, that maybe he could be flying around and people don't know. But there are certain things you have to do, like register flight plans under certain conditions, and then all aircraft that meet certain criteria have to be broadcasting their position via ADSB and the like. So it might be difficult to hide, but not impossible. You only need a company register, a few companies kind of registered and wrapped, and holding companies, whatever those people do. So I just don't know whether he could hide his paper trail there. I'm afraid.
Hmm. Okay. I imagine there's got to be a way to do that. Like you don't own the
Well, I
jet.
mean, the plane doesn't have to say Elon Musk on it, but there's a
Right.
register of tail numbers.
Right.
And that's going to be registered to the plane's going to be owned by a company, right? A corporate entity. It's going to be owned by some legal entity, whether that's a person or a company. So the question is, could he register a company where people can't work out whose plane that is? It depends how much he's being stalked, right? If he's got fans that kind of follow him around and know his rough movements, then I suspect the information will get out. It wouldn't be difficult to piece together, but it just depends how many people are taking an unhealthy interest in Elon Musk's movements, I guess.
Well, if his company is in Delaware, he doesn't have to officially put his name on there. It would take some work to figure it out, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is, it only takes one or two nosy people to notice what his movements, um, and then to correlate. So they see him go towards an airfield, and then you see a plane move, right? And you see that a couple of times. It depends how nosy people are, right? If there's a bunch of stalkers out there, they'll soon, and they're communicating with each other, they'll soon work it out, right? They saw Elon Musk move towards an airfield, an aircraft that because you got plane spotters in the same way as you have train spotters, right? And they like to make it their business to look at all this kind of crazy shit. They're batshit crazy, these people, by the way. When I was in the Air Force, we were doing it kind of ruined the mood. We had all our flight suits tied around our waist, Top Gun style, literally playing volleyball on the grass, not quite in the sand. And some plane spotter came up to the chainmail fence and said, "Hey, can I speak to you for a minute?" And I said, "Sure, no problem." He started asking me questions about the aircraft, stall speeds, this, that, and the other. And I answered the questions, and then he said, "And what's the tail? What's the color of the paint on the tail?" I said, "Well, it's red, isn't it?" And he goes, "No, what's the Pantone color?" I said, "What do you mean, like the color code?" He said, "Yeah." I said, I have no clue. It's red." And he said, "Well, how come you fly the aircraft and you don't know what the Pantone color of the tail is?" I'm like looking at this guy as if his fucking head's on upside down, because why the hell do I need to know the Pantone color of the tail? Anyway, those sort of people take a lot of interest in detail, is my point here. And you only need a couple of those people. You only need a couple of those people communicating to make the very simple connection that Elon Musk moved towards an airfield, some plane that they haven't anally tracked moved from A to B, and then if geek at end B goes, "Oh, Elon Musk rocked up at emerged from this airfield," and they're going to correlate the tail number, and then you've got the tail number, and it's Musk's plane, and then that until he buys another plane. So that would be the thing that would be hardest for him to mask, would be busybody plane spotters, basically, and then plus the internet equals bloody hard to move around on a moderate size aircraft without somebody noticing when you're famous.
But why would you want to buy a plane? Why don't you just, hire a service, one of those chartered planes, and every time you will have a different plane going from one place to another? Like, I don't know, Qatar business jets or whatever. They will do that, and every time you will be on a different plane.
You could do, but it's a good tax write-off, and it's good ego stroke to have your own. So
It's a good ego stroke. Okay. I don't know that he's. I don't know that happens after 100 billion anymore. Um, okay, let's get to the next story.
That's why. Oh, sorry. That's why it's important that we have jobs in the future for all these people, because it's in our own interest that people like this have things to do. Anyways.
Line is black. Give me 2 seconds
I
here.
mean, people like that can be useful, actually. They have spotted movements and led to resolutions of crimes and the like as well. So, it's a double-edged sword. If you are a famous person wanting to move around privately, it's difficult because of all the busybodies, as you might want to call them. But on the other hand, if you're a criminal trying to move around, then the busybodies sometimes produce quite useful information for the FBI and the like. So.
Text needs to be black again. There we go. Okay. Oh, that works. Okay. Next up is Tesla rolls out an update adding support for Steam on their 2022 Model S and X vehicles or newer with 16 gigabytes of RAM, Apple Music, Light Show, and more. So basically, you can now play video games on your Tesla's screen.
And you sing with Apple. So you can do karaoke in your car now.
Yeah, your
This
Tesla
is
is.
this is a really cool update. A few years ago, what's his name? Jeremy Clarkson of what used to be called Top Gear in the UK. I think they now call it the Grand Tour. He described my previous favourite car, a Nissan GTR, as a $50,000 PlayStation many years ago. And this is pretty much literally turning the Tesla into a $50,000 PlayStation. That's pretty cool. I'm wondering if my MCU qualifies for this or not.
Okay. Yeah, somebody asked him how good the hardware is behind this, and Elon responded PS5, like as its equivalent to a PS5 or whatever. Okay,
Could it
next. Yeah.
uh, could it be part of the actual deal when he actually visited Apple? And then
I don't think this
the
has
whole
got anything to
notion
do
was
with
that
Apple, has it?
no,
Oh, the
but
Apple Music bit. Sorry, the Apple Music bit. Sure.
the Twitter was just about to be actually removed from the iPhone, so that was the news in the in making. And all of a sudden, like he actually visits the Apple, so you scratch my back, I scratch yours, kind of thing.
It's really good usability for a Tesla owner because I'm an Apple Music guy because I can. It's one of the only services where I can upload my own music. I've got stuff I recorded decades ago from the radio and stuff. And that all blends nicely in Apple Music, and I like their catalog. So I have Apple Music. I've tried Spotify and Tidal. And when I try and use that in the car, it's a pain in the balls because the way that the Tesla deals with that's a technical term, by the way. The way the Tesla deals with Bluetooth connections when you're trying to use things like Clubhouse, it's just a pain. You get in the car and then your Clubhouse starts coming out the car, and I'm like, so I just disable the Bluetooth audio between the phone and the car. And I basically don't listen to music, or I listen to it on my AirPods, which isn't legal in all places. I think it is here, whilst driving. But having Apple Music on the car alongside Spotify and Tidal is great. So that's cool. And then the Steam thing is pretty huge potentially. I don't know who it's huge for. I guess it's huge for the people who are being self-driven in a few years and can play games as they drive down the road. But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
It is a fun update. Hi, everyone. And is available for the peasant cars before anyone else. So, yesterday we were having this discussion. First of all, my friend was suggesting to get the Apple, some service that allow you to have Apple TV, Apple Music, and the storage. And, that saves money. And now with Tesla, he said that it paired really well.
You mean CarPlay?
No, I think Aaron's
No,
talking
no,
about
they don't have
Apple
CarPlay.
One. I think you're talking
Apple
about
One,
Apple
yes.
One. Yeah, the combined. When you get to a threshold number of services like iCloud storage, um, Apple TV music, then you get to a fuck it threshold where you go, fuck it, I'll subscribe to Apple One. Because then I get news and X and Y and Z. It's quite a clever model actually to get you just enough services that you don't mind then committing to a higher subscription price than you really
How
need.
much?
For example, I never use Apple News and I never use Apple whatever else is included in Apple One, but it's still
Yeah, but the thing was that my friend pays like about $10 for the iCloud storage already. And Apple One was, I think, $17. And you can share it with your family. It gives you storage plus all these things, music and TV and stuff. And I had no idea about this because I subscribe everything individually and that adds up.
yeah, it's
That was
great. Yeah, yeah,
very good.
I subscribe to it too, but it's an interesting subscription model when you have a company that has multiple different services. You get this strange gravitation when you offer a bundled attraction like that. Because, for instance, Apple News, occasionally it's handy to have Apple News and to read magazines on it and all that sort of stuff, but it's not enough to pay for the subscription of Apple News. And I can't remember what the other service included in Apple One is that I hardly ever use, but there's another one. But it still adds value to the fact that I'll pay for Apple One, given that I can now, whenever I want, jump on Apple News and look at the magazines. It's cognitively, it's quite interesting to say, well, if three of the five services offered, you'd be paying for anyway, and it would be the same price in Apple One, then I feel really like I'm getting extra value, even though I don't actually care about the other two services. It's just quite an interesting model. A few companies have done that. Google are doing exactly the same thing, by the way, under the same name, Google One. So anyway, I'll stop waffling for a bit.
Next is Bloomberg says that CZ from Binance tells Binance staff to expect a bumpy several months, but the exchange will survive any crypto winter following massive withdrawals. Wall Street Journal says Tether plans to stop using loans denominated in its Tether stablecoin throughout 2023 following a report on the potentially risky practice. Bloomberg says the DOJ charged SBF with violating campaign finance laws, creating a showdown over what could be the biggest recent illegal infusion of money in U.S. politics. Interesting. Violating campaign finance laws. creating a showdown over what could be the biggest recent illegal infusion of money in politics. Some are arguing that his campaign contributions to Democrats could have, in the U.S. where the election battles are so close, that his significant Democrat or campaign contributions to Democrats could have made a significant difference in what is now the shape of the number of Democrats on Capitol Hill and what have you. So and shortly after people started making that point, he said, "Oh, but I gave money to Republicans too, but it's all hidden. It's very dark. No one can find it." Oh, well, that's
Well,
convenient.
his a couple of his other guys give to the Republicans, but not at his level. They give millions also, but not at his level of
But they
giving.
would sort of
Also,
need to. I'd love to see proof of that because if there isn't any, because he was called out on that, like, oh, you potentially fucked up democracy in America, like you're gonna hang. And oh, no, I did it to the Republicans equally. Okay, well, great, show us the receipts. Well, I don't have them. Well, that's convenient. Anyway, next, CNBC says citing SBF's flight risk, the Bahamas judge denies him bail and says he should be remanded to Bahamian custody until February 8th. And I'm told that the prison in the Bahamas is one of the worst in the world, from a reliable source.
Are you sure he's not in the penthouse?
Good question.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's no like photos or any related stories where he is and where he's put. And the timing was so convenient that he didn't need to like for the stand for the hearing. So it seems like some backstories there.
Hi, Donna here. Given the embarrassment to the Bahamas, it would be highly unlikely that they would put him in the penthouse back where he was with just an ankle bracelet, which is what his lawyers wanted. Given the really really bad mark already that they're facing for lack of regulatory oversight, so I think he's in the jail, and as the article reports, awaiting a hearing in February.
Yeah, his lawyers pushed for him to be able to, be in one of his properties with an ankle monitor, but the prosecution made the point that under the Bahamian extradition treaty with the U.S., they had to actually hold him in custody. So he's definitely in jail. There's not pictures of him in jail because the Bahamian justice system doesn't, you know, take pictures of prisoners to appease Twitter. Like that's not a thing that happens in the real world.
Okay. Next up is the SEC charges 8 influencers with securities fraud, alleging that they used Twitter and Discord to manipulate stocks from January 2020 as part of a $100 million scheme. I would love to hear the examples and how much it moved the market. Part of a $100 million scheme to use social media platforms as well as podcasts to manipulate the price of certain stocks. The influencers are not household names. They had accrued more than 2 million followers across various social media platforms where they routinely posted photos of their wealth, including exotic sports cars, etc. Influencers charged include PJ Matlock, whose real name is Perry Matlock. He had more than 340,000 Twitter followers. Other defendants include Edward Constantine, who went by the name Zach Morris. Each of them have at least 100,000 Twitter followers. The 8 individuals are also facing federal criminal fraud charges after purchasing the stocks and encouraging their followers to do the same. The defendants regularly sold their shares without ever having disclosed their plans to dump the securities while they were promoting them. Quote, "We're robbing fucking idiots of their money," one allegedly said, "Yeah, well, that comment is going to come back to bite you in the ass." So they were doing pump and dumps, and they got caught using social media and working in cahoots with their aggregated followings. Yeah, well, you're gonna do some hard time. So the next is, as Tesla stock drops 54% in 2022, on pace for its worst year on record, investors criticize Elon Musk's involvement in Twitter and his lack of focus on Tesla. Makes sense. Next, Washington Post. The son of a murdered Ethiopian professor files a lawsuit against Meta in Kenya, alleging Meta's algorithms promote hateful and violent content for engagement. The lawsuit alleges the social media giant is fueling violence and hate across eastern and southern Africa. Reuters has an investigation detailing the global supply chain that continues to offer Russia access to Western components and electronics, including from Intel and AMD. Okay, well, I imagine those holes will now soon be plugged. On March 3rd of this year, Intel said it had suspended all shipments to customers in Russia. Reuters found at least $500 million worth of Intel products arrived in Russia in the months that followed. I guess if there's no strong punishment and there's a lot of money to be made. By the way, from what I understand, there might be other World War historians that know more than I do on this point. The rumor is that Orange Fanta was created by Coca-Cola because Coca-Cola was banned from selling Coke to Germany during the World War, and so they made Fanta. So perhaps a similar thing is afoot. As lawmakers introduce legislation that aims to ban TikTok or any social media company in or under the influence of China, Russia, or other U.S. adversaries. Oh, how interesting! How very, very interesting. CNBC.
Finally,
U.S. lawmakers introduce legislation that aims to ban TikTok and any social media companies in or under the influence of China, Russia, and other U.S. adversaries. A new bill from a bipartisan group of lawmakers would ban TikTok in the U.S.
Is Vine out yet?
That's exactly the right
what
question. The, the
did
rumor
they use? Sorry.
the rumor was there was a deadline by the end of the year. There was also very, very recent rumors since we met yesterday that some team members were let go for not meeting an important deadline. And I don't know if that's the Vine team or not, because I'm sure there's multiple deadlines happening at Twitter at the moment. But Twitter is now, if TikTok does get banned, and I'm going to go out and make a bit of a prediction, despite Ken's very, very good point that would be a bit of political dynamite for, some political figures who depend on their, votes. But that'd be wildly unpopular with a lot of people if you're part of the banning of TikTok. But for many reasons, I believe something tells me it's going to happen. And boy, is
Wouldn't it
Twitter.
make for wouldn't it make for a good legal case too, to see if this is, even if a law is passed, if it's constitutional?
We can ban TikTok.
In the U.S., then you know, what kind of law would you,
Well,
you know,
isn't it registered partially as a U.S. entity that has links to China?
That's why they said under the influence of
That
someone else.
is
It's easy to make a
exactly why
case
they
that
Well,
they are.
named it that way. Yeah.
it still would be a good case to see pass through the courts because the repercussions, you guys are just thinking of just TikTok. I mean, this is repercussions in a lot of other areas.
Sure.
Yes,
Exactly.
it's TikTok, it's Likey, and all the other ones like it.
That's what I was going to share earlier, because I want to know what kind of law they are implementing on it or the jurisdiction. Because if it's national security threat, that's one thing. But if it's just the threat to, for example, well-being, or I don't know, is it just a legal thing? Is it a psychological reason or political reason or all of the above or just national security? Because all of these laws would have different kind of implication, and how the future of the social media would be treated then. This would set precedents.
Also, Rubio's trying to up his game. I mean, he had a very successful campaign for reelection to Senate where he really trounced his competitor. And this allows him to stick his anchor into another topic to get him more attention and international focus.
And then they can say things like, TikTok is causing our youth to go crazy and do all sorts of, weird illegal things like shoot at their schools. Therefore, this is not just a national security. This is also causing issues in our social fabric. Therefore, we need to, exercise our right to ban things when they're not up to our liking.
So why don't we ban rap music and any kind of violent and over sexualized things?
Oh, we made that. It's different.
Uh,
No, yeah, exactly. Thank you.
The
so the
song isn't a working algorithm. That's the difference.
the article
The
says,
addiction.
hold on
Sorry.
one second. The FBI director Christopher Wray testified before Congress recently that he's extremely concerned about the Chinese government's potential influence through TikTok on U.S. users. That's the head of the FBI saying he's extremely concerned, not a little bit, extremely concerned of the Chinese government's potential to influence through TikTok on U.S. users. The new bill introduced by Rubio and others that you probably haven't heard of would ban all transactions from any social media company in or under the influence of China, Russia, and several other foreign countries of concern. Donna, you wanted to say?
Does that include Kaspersky, the antivirus company, and a bunch of the VPN?
That's not considered social media, I would think.
Okay, but okay. What about things like the VPNs that they have, where
This,
you're
this,
running
the main phrase
local?
here is all transactions from any social media company in or under the influence of China, Russia, or several other. So I think they mean what they say when they say social media.
Specific. It's way too specific, if you notice, because other companies can also be engaged in espionage and all sort of misdoing with the U.S., but they specifically.
There's already been lots of bans of Chinese cameras. Hikvision and others have already been banned.
Yeah, so this
The
isn't
Drones.
difference
necessarily just an
in the
espionage. Sorry.
Well, by the way, the
sorry.
drones, DJI drones have been banned.
Yeah, that's what I said,
Yeah.
drones.
Yeah, the difference in the algorithm, the way it's used in China is totally different than the way it's promoting certain very negative, harmful trends in America. So there is that evidence that their youth is not watching the same thing as what is pushed down through our viewers here in United States and other Western countries. So that's a huge difference. And then based on those trends or based on those suggestive kind of thought processes, youth have followed through and caused a lot of destruction, not only physically but psychologically as well. So, as opposed to a song which is released in throughout the world in the same manner, it's not manipulated to change the verbiage or the messaging based on the country. So there is this stark difference here.
Well, I would bear to disagree partially on that too, because those of my family members who have been in the industry would tell you that those for the last 30 years, the radio stations and also the companies in the music industry, we saw the transition of the music. We also saw over time what was pushed and what was pushed out and what was accepted and what has become now normalized. So I get everybody's talking about this technological stuff, but there are some common sense things that we've seen, and the acceptance of some of this harsh. It's so funny how we are upset about TikTok and what it's pushing, but we can't see the other things that have been pushed also. I'm not here to convince you. It's just an opinion that myself and my circle has. I agree with what's going on with TikTok, but I also think that there are other things that have been happening in a slower manner. But we saw our radio stations taken over and changed too.
So yeah,
Right.
I think that's a good point because like radio and songs and music influence people. It changes how they feel. It can influence how they think if they're getting involved in listening to the lyrics. But social media, we think about dopamine hacking, for instance. That's a phrase that people know about. It seems like a think tank of psychologists would look at this a little differently than perhaps the room full of people that are more tech savvy. The way that it impacts the mind is what I think the FBI director is very much being cautious about. And I think that everyone listening in this room should consider that as well. How does it impact the psychology of the children in the country of America?
Yeah, but
I
there's a
agree.
big difference, right? There's one thing, like let's say music and so on, that was created in your own country from your own artist, in your own culture, basically. That's some one thing. And then there's another thing, a foreign country that has been spying and trying to convince people to be radical or radicalized like Russia and influence our democracy. That's a whole different threat and story. And you don't want to go there and say, oh, this music you cannot listen to and so on, because then you turn into those countries. And and you just make the music more interesting. It's the same with drugs. Like usually if you criminalize it, you just have more problems than if you have it out in the open. But that's a whole that other discussion again.
I don't
And
know.
I
I
Well, you
think
hit the nail on the head. Think about Cambridge Analytica. And yeah, what you just said about foreign influence in the psychology of the people in another country. Yeah, think about Cambridge Analytica. How many data points did they have on each voter? And how did they influence the Brexit vote?
I agree with the change in messaging in music or other industry that Robert is mentioning. Yes, that is true. But at the same time, the app is also trying to access, without knowledge, some foreign or U.S. diplomats or some important. Maybe person in the government and their household through the kid's phone. That is not legal, and that's kind of come in the category of spying and collecting data or information, which is not the purpose of the app. The purpose of the app is social media consumption, communication. Music listening is something that you do intentionally turn on your radio and listen to it. But when you're turning on this app, you are potentially subjected or have the potential of threat of having your data relayed to China unknowingly. So that's the other side effect this app has.
all I'm saying is what you all, and I'm not saying you all particularly, what is projected as what people like me look, say, and act like over the last 30 years, 40 years has changed. And it was a slow change that you all have picked up, and some have embraced the music. Yes, we think music is by a choice, but the projection that was accepted on what was probably hardly 2% of us has been projected as an image as being 100% of us. And now you're seeing it happen faster with technology. So,
Well, I think this is no different than in banning Huawei or production, moving production out of certain countries. And to your point, to the earlier points, I think this is all on a spectrum, right? It's kind of that four quadrant. What's high reach, low impact, high reach, high impact, and I think, and we've talked about it in this room, that when you're in the app, it becomes, many apps become surveillance about your location, which has predictive analytics about when to target you and what. And if you go back 30, 40 years, like you said, you may have an article from a questionable left or right leaning source, and the ability to cascade that and drive reach. You can't just share that. Oh, you have an opinion. In this, with TikTok, you can take things that are, I think, in the conscious and subconscious, and cascade them in ways that create a lot of unintended consequences. People could say that about the U.S. too, but if you just look at software, TikTok being software, we're doing the same thing with hardware, and eliminating what hardware we can put in our telcos, our carriers, our service providers. I mean, I don't think this is any different than the hardware bans that we put on a company like Huawei. My 2 cents.
I think one more point, and I think that point is not being discussed enough. And being the tech guys, like we always focus on the data and then how it's going to impact in the technology world. But I think there's another element. The nations have to really look at the social implications of like any app kind of like transgressing into a particular society, and what sort of like impact is creating on the younger generation and the new generation which is coming up and growing up with this extra piece of thing which is probably not in line with how the things is being run in that particular country. So I think there's definitely a social element which is like just put the genie out of the box, that which is not predictable how the younger generation is going to actually turn up, like literally. So if you look at this, some of the actual schools and the high schools and all that, like what sort of like impact it had created in past whatever 7 8 years. And if you compare that with those guys who actually graduated like about 7 8 years ago, who didn't have the TikTok or Insta, they turn out very differently. So I think there has to be a discussion on this particular point, that if this one of the apps get that kind of attraction, which is every single youngster is going to be getting hands on, that what sort of like generation is going to be coming out. So I think apart from the data and technology and all that, I think there is another element which needs to be paid attention to. Thanks.
The other,
Okay.
the other,
I would say one thing.
yeah.
Our perceptions control our behaviors, and therefore, whoever controls our perceptions controls us.
I agree, and the
Spot
and the
on.
thing that we saw happening. So let's forget that it's a non-U.S. company. Let's take a look at Facebook. Love it or hate it, has it made us better? Where's the engagement gone? So that's a U.S.-based company. It has not done great things. It failed to see the need to move from social media to social commerce. I'm actually starting to witness that trend. I just bought something 3 days ago because it popped up on Instagram. And, I think we talked last week about Amazon, paying us $2 to monitor our data. The people who get the revenue model correct and actually start selling goods and services, and not persuasive tactics that I think largely we don't see, because our brain is wired to be 95% emotional or based on emotion and 5% on fact. I think the previous three speakers is this is controlling our perceptions, and I'm guilty of it as a father. I mean, I see it happen to my kids, and I don't like the before and after picture, and it's a little scary to know where it's going. Some apps are I would say relatively benign, but there's precedent for, I think it was the Atlantic, I can't remember which article, but it talked about the lost decade for us in the U.S. And globally, that we've essentially, through social media in non-generative use cases, we've lost a decade, and it's literally been stupid. I think that's the name of the article. So take what we've learned in the U.S. and the good, the bad, and the indifferent, the Cambridge Analytica, the clues are everywhere. The clues are everywhere where this is going. And it's not moving in the model that it needs to for generative use cases. And the macro one we've talking about is this, social media needs to move into generative social commerce of goods and services. And if they don't, they will be banned, blocked, or regulated. My last point.
Yeah, and I kind of wanted to bring something up. First of all, the percentages about the brain, I don't know if that's factual, but we'll leave that open for interpretation. Cognitive dissonance, it's interesting when people come to have information come their way like this. It's either get to the root and remove what is causing the dissonance, or rationalize it to be more calm in the mind, less dissonant. But it's just a series of rationalizations that have helped one be okay with the knowledge that they've just been presented with. And that's something that I hope doesn't happen with this TikTok issue. Because, like you said, Matt, as a father, I think that is of great deal of importance. The how this impacts the minds of the children, and yes, of course, social media in the country walls of America has also impacted the minds of children, but that's also under the rules and the influence, like the rules and stipulations of the government or the law of that nation itself.
Okay, anyone else with a thought before we roll on?
Just the potential for addiction, which is very high with TikTok, and also teens and children, because you're allowed to use it when you're 12-year-old or even younger. They are misdiagnosing their mental health and illnesses based on certain trends. Thinking that they have, for example, ADHD or anxiety or depression, when it's just a fake video convincing them of such. That affects their psychological health, growth, their personal view of themselves, and then affects their level of confidence and value. And then that kind of psychology plays into how they perform in school or make decision based on such perceived fake wrong impressions about their psychological health, limiting them. So there are many different implications of such kind of social media based usage that not only addicts younger people's brain, but also led them to believe that they are not normal or okay, so limiting their growth in future.
Hey, I was going to listen, but I'm going to play devil's advocate because we have this conversation all the time. And we always forget the human aspect, which is the parent. The parent is the beginning and the end of everything. As a parent, as a single parent, because I don't want anyone to think that I live in some glass house that, where everything's perfect, but I am a single parent and of two boys. And I've raised them by myself with some community help with wonderful men and women in my son's life, but parents need to take onus. You cannot blame every piece of technology or every tool for for everything. Parents have to step in. You have to change your parenting style. You can't put kids in front of the TV or put a phone in front of the TV, because let's be honest, when the parents put phones in front of kids or tablets and all this other stuff, it's to have that device parent for them, because they do not either have time, they're tired, they're frustrated, they're always something. And also too, we're not teaching kids anymore how to critically and strategic think at a young age, because we are not engaging them on that level. So whether it's TikTok or Facebook, it'll always be something else for whatever issue that's happening, because us as people, as a society, does not want to take onus. Nobody wants to be responsible when it comes to this type of stuff like this. But until we get over that, it'll just be something else. And then to even to add to that point, I had so many thoughts because I'm very passionate about responsibility as a parent. We, you know, I'll come back with my thought and I'll put it in the chat because now I know what I wanted to say. For every negative thing that we've been saying about TikTok, Twitter, and Facebook, and all these other social media and stuff, because there's many, there have been a lot of great things that come out of it. We live in an interconnected world now where we can share information. At the start of this, people were able to share a lot of things that were going on in their neighborhood, whether it was with the police, whether it's for abuse, whether it's political things that are happening in their country. These apps have served a great purpose in informing society, despite what we all want to think. However, again, there do needs to be some guardrails, but I think it starts more at the individual level versus going straight for the app because I mean it's not going to solve anything. It'll just be the same thing over and over again, whether it's social media or something else. And that's all I wanted to say.
Okay.
Can
Independent.
I come back and be the angel's advocate and speak as a shared custody parent that I do not have the capacity to take responsibility for my children 24/7 because they're not in my custody, that it takes a village. And I'd like to compare it to the other substances our children, as they get older, we fear that they may come across that becomes addictive and harmful, like drugs or sex, or these things that you want to have control, you want to have privacy, you want to be able to just like be the parent to role model things. But when I was a 12-year-old, a 9-year-old, a 14-year-old, none of these things existed. So I think we have a whole lot of survivorship bias because we are, straddling the analog and the digital world in ways that kids today can't. That's not even a choice. It even if you keep them as an Amish Luddite away from technology, it's surrounding them at school. They're going to want to play games through their library connection when they're in second grade. They're little math games, and you want to let them play that on their Chromebook. But they don't have their own devices. My 8-year-old twins, boy and girl, and when you enter in things that are outside of your control, if you are a parent, you can understand that health problems. There's the sucky part about parenthood is it's like remote control living a what if world. If you had to start over, how could you not fuck up your kids? Well, here you go. But you don't have control over whether they get around the wrong kid at school and introduced to drugs or alcohol. And these social media, I think as a parent for my 8-year-old kids, I want to treat it as so dangerous, but I don't know how to put a lid around it because I don't have the academic support to show it how harmful this is. And we're all wandering around in this fractal dystopia with kids that don't have the survivorship of being in midlife and having gotten to this side of it without hopefully without the addiction. But I took Facebook off my phone 7 years ago, and rarely if ever you do anything other than Messenger because of people that are in a network because of it. But I saw it drive a wedge in so many relations, social media in general, just phone, screens. And so if you think you can insulate your children from screens, leave it as general as that. But here's what TikTok does. It, as Nicholas says, takes over the mimetic content that young people, I don't pay attention to what's on TikTok because I avoid it. But I don't know if the classroom of kids in, I don't know, fifth grade, seventh grade, some grade, it's going to be 80% of the kids today, not when my kids get to that level, because I can't predict the future. It's probably going to get banned, hopefully, in the next period of time. But we don't know, as I think Karam mentioned, the 10-year set of graduates that have this anxiety problem because they have separation anxiety from the dopamine hit of their screen. Leave it as general as that. And TikTok is polluting or making the screen more addictive because it's got everything at their fingertips in short form and their attention span is hijacked. And I'll leave that as my piece. I don't have enough of my own parenting to fix everybody else's kids. We need to do this as a community. And damn it, technology is moving so fast that we here are having a complicated discussion. Are they doing that on Capitol Hill at this level? No, they don't even know how to turn the computer on.
You know, funny
Oh,
enough,
It's
can I
just
respond to
quickly,
that real
Chris.
fast so I can give you
Just
something anecdotal?
Yeah,
Because
we wouldn't have
absolutely.
uh,
people with heroin giving it out on in the school. So why do we have that?
so,
Like, like
so I guess David is responding to my thing because we've kind of like butted heads on this before, and I don't want to hijack the discussion. It's just that parenting is near and dear. So
But I
okay,
agree with
wait a minute, David. Let
as
me
a
finish. Let me
parent, I
finish. But
do, but we
let me
don't.
finish, David. Let me
We're
finish.
not
I don't want to,
solipsists.
David. I don't want to argue with you. Let me finish because I don't ever interrupt anybody in this room, if anything. So let's stop. So what I was alluding to was one, not living in a bubble, and two, not um, not saying that there doesn't need to be guardrails. But however, whether it's co-parenting, having both parents, being a single parent, the critical tools that your children need to engage, whether it's with a device or with people, is critical and strategic thinking. And yes, you cannot be there all the time because you cannot protect your child for everything. That is a part of learning. I will give you an example, and not, again, it's not perfect. My son, my youngest one, he's 19 now. But when he was younger, he told me that, well, we have had two instances. One where I never saw a friend that was coming around the house anymore. And I asked him about said friend. He said, Mommy, yeah, I don't hang out with him anymore. And I was like, why not? He was like, yeah, he was doing things that I didn't agree with. He was about 13. And I was like, so what was he doing? He was like, he started being bad in school. He started selling drugs and he tried to get me to do it. And I was like, why would he try to get you to do it? And mind you, we live in a really nice neighborhood, lived in Towson, Maryland, right on the campus, went to a great school. And I was like, why? And he was like, I don't know, but I told him I don't need to do that because my mom works hard and she takes care of me. And your mom is a single mom too. So you shouldn't be doing it. Mind you, I wasn't there for that, but I was fortunate that the tools I gave my son, critical thinking, strategic thinking, um, being introspective and retrospective, understanding the environment, I had to trust that those were going to work. And if you are co parenting, you should have these conversations with the other parent. I can bring a woman in right now who works with kids and families, and she was an adoptee, so she had a lot of stuff. And she told me that they don't even use the word co parent, her and her ex partner. They actually have a good relationship. And to raise their daughter cannot even tell whether, like mommy and daddy aren't together anymore, and they have different spouses. They decided to change the narrative and not be like that. And you, as the adult, you can't be putting your stuff on your kids. If you want a better place, you have to do those things. And I'm not saying I understand your situation and I know that other person, because I know that there's really screwed up people in the world and stuff like that. But that's the conversation you need to have with that other person. And I'm going to end it with that. And that's not for feedback. That's just food for thought. And if you want to talk further, David, let's hand it here because I don't want to hijack tech
I,
news about
I
this.
put it in the chat. I'm not in an oppositional frame. I don't like the characterization that I didn't agree with what you had to say because I didn't get a chance to say that. I agree that it's on the parent in that we've talked in this in the past, and
I don't know if Nicholas
I
is
don't know if
still here,
Nicholas is still
but
here,
about
but about the macro, and the meta. I'm talking at the meta level. That let's look back. Do we think TikTok is a good thing for all 10-year-olds to have soaking and marinating in? No, I just don't think it is. That's my opinion. At the meta level and at the micro where I parent, I'm doing a great job. I don't have that many problems. I'm just talking about the hypothetical because there's a lot of privilege that we represent in this room on this stage for people who don't have the technical skills, the social skills, the
income, the
income,
whatever.
the whatever to have the time to do this. And I mean, this is for averages way lower. Think about the mirror image of the people in this room. And do we think that they're bad parenting skills? It's not, it's the same reason I am a responsible parent because I don't want to be one of them, right? But for those that aren't doing a good job, their kids are going to suffer from this addiction that becomes a social problem at the not the micro, maybe the macro at your local community level where crime might exist, where the pipeline to prison problem might exist. I don't know. I'm not trying to speak to things that I don't know about. I just mean that in this room, I thought other people talked about, they could kind of notice the attention span of some of the youngest people coming out of high school and college doesn't seem to be what it used to be. And very correlation, not causation. But let's just continue the conversation of, is this a good idea to have it a free for all? Just because a room full of adults can handle it? Yeah, I know we all can, but that's not what the point was. We were trying to talk about policy. That's the level I was discussing, not whether good single parents, dual parents, perfect parents, Donna Reed. I don't care. If you raised a good kid, I'm here to applaud that. If that was 20 years ago, it was not around TikTok. And it was probably less challenging than the hypothetical start over today. And that's all I want to say is, do we think this is a good idea? And put it out there as softly as that. But no, I'm not in a parenting. I barely heard your anecdote because I wanted to keep it at the meta level.
Okay,
Well, I
that's
think that
understand,
was
but
an
you can't have
amazing
policy
thing to
for
listen to.
everything, though. We can't ask for smaller government and then expect the government to resolve everything.
In a
That's
Yeah,
why
democracy,
so this
it's
is
that's
to
why I
what
ask for
we're
said
things.
parenting
That's the
versus
generic
policy.
point I was talking
Yeah,
about.
yeah, but
Other than in a
that's different. But I get
dictatorship and an autocracy, in a democracy, I was saying with my political free speech, I would like to ask for something better. So I can ask for smaller, bigger, more taxes, less taxes. I can ask because that's what we're here for. So that's what I was asking, just
I
putting
have
it
a
out there.
question for you, David. Is it mandated to download TikTok on your smartphone for your kid?
No,
Yeah,
I,
don't download it
my
and
kids don't
don't
even have
give
a
them the
phone.
account
So
to download it.
hang on. My kids
This
don't
is
have
in
a
your
phone. I
control,
wasn't talking about any
David.
of that. One question at a time. No, it's not mandated for anybody to put TikTok on their phone. That doesn't mean that it isn't mandated that when the kid turns 21, they can go buy alcohol on their own, and that's not mandated
21 is not a
anywhere.
kid, it's an adult.
Well,
Cheryl, I love you. Great question.
got it. Yep. And I answered it no instantly. No, of course not. There's no mandated to have a phone. My kids don't have phones. You guys are missing the point. I'm not arguing for a position on my kids' phones.
Yeah, so I think I'm getting the point here, and so if anyone was listening to Chris with Chat GPT, one of the things that really blew him away was that it psychoanalyzed him. Okay, so like um, that right there is basically the point. It's not arguing about who's parenting better than the other person, who's got the responsibility as a parent. There are a lot of people in low income situations that are like drowning with responsibility as parents. And they might easily miss that we are in a point in time where Chat GPT just psychoanalyzed Chris. And so think about the power now with the technology that we are entering, like the technological paradigm shift that we're entering into today. That's the point.
I think there are As well, many points to be made. repeating. Sorry, I don't know if I overspoke someone.
I was just going to say that there are many points to be made, and perhaps we need to look at this from like a global sort of a view instead of like the effect of something like this on specific families, because I think families are going to suffer with TikTok or with whatever other media. Remember, Instagram had this influence on little girls, and this was documented or proved recently that yes, it did have this negative influence on little girls, where they had a problem with self-image. And now with Lensa, people are all beautifying their images beyond recognition to the point where they're getting their dopamine hack or whatever out of it. It's this is the trend of things to come, and I sort of applaud the idea that parents have a responsibility to ensure that this world is a little bit safer for their children in the future. But again, we do need to provide them with the analytical and critical thinking methodologies that allow them to make the right decisions even when the parents are not there. And again, this is a very tough, bigger sort of discussion to have. Maybe this specific item of TikTok getting banned in the US is a little bit outside of it, or part of it in this case, but we definitely need to look at the bigger picture of what is this going to do on the global scale, not just in the US. There are a lot of countries that are actually revolve as satellites in the US sort of legal system, and they will quickly adopt whatever the US comes up with, and this is going to harm TikTok in a big manner if this gets adopted internationally. Because a lot of people are going to say, well, if the if the US is banning this from their kids, then there has to be something really bad going on, and therefore,
The Chinese ban the kids from using it, so we know
yeah,
it's
yeah,
bad. The Chinese ban their own kids
I know. Yeah,
and
Chinese
regulate its
give
use.
limits. Yeah, give limits for their children, but it's not. A lot of places around the world, this is not commonplace knowledge. The parents will not know, but the governments will
Right.
know. They're like,
So
something definitely is going on here, and we definitely need to follow suit. Sorry, I'm landing my plane.
So Sam,
so
you said something. Oh, go ahead, Nicholas. Sorry. Yeah, your
sorry,
mic's quieter today. So.
sorry. Um, I think that everybody's got the right frame on this, but the frame is fractal. And so everybody sees uniquely, and everybody's perceptions are, correct from the place with which which they're standing. And this is why it's a complicated issue. I think David's point was very well made, which is that we have to take responsibility for each other. So the economy that we're in, that we need to be in, is an economy of me, where I need my individual rights represented, and the economy of we, where our collective data gives deep insights into our culture. And so, if we understand that the way we act as humans is in chemistry, in biology, in physics, in economics, etc., we're acting in multiple different frames. We have to look at technology as it affects us in these frames. So we have a view to technology within the state frame, we have a view towards technology within a corporate frame, and we have a view towards technology in a personal frame. And around that, comes the issues of privacy, come the issues of AI, and come the issues of responsibility. And that depends on the system within which you live. Because if you are living in China, you don't get the version of TikTok that American children get or British children get. You get the Chinese version. And they can regulate that because they have a political system which is a central controlled system. In the West, where we don't have that system, we can only bring pressure to bear at the level in which we feel we can participate. So if you're a parent that is able to participate because you're present in the home and you see what your children are doing and you're helicoptering or you're using tools like net nannies, etc., then you can regulate that. I have to say, I used to regulate my children's phones, but they used to ask me for permission so frequently and interrupt me all the time and then come and make their case for why they needed this. I gave up. Now, that may sound terrible, but I did. I was just like, I thought, okay, I have to give them tools, sort of like Elle said, to actually be able to self regulate. And that was the only way, because I certainly couldn't regulate them. So we have to participate in society to regulate these companies. And is it reasonable to regulate TikTok? Yes, because America has that right to act as the parent, or the political forces have the right to act as a sort of parent to the ability for that company to enter the system. So I think that it's really, everybody has their own view, and I think that it is reasonable that we should elect leaders and elect governments that say it is not in the national interest for the Chinese state to have insight as to our citizens' psyche as well as influence their psyche, because if you spend a large portion of the day staring at your screen, which we all do, then you have the ability to influence the perception of that person. So if you have access to influencing perceptions, you probably should be regulated by a regulator. And that regulator is probably controlled by the government. In the same way, I don't believe Elon should have control of Twitter because he can affect the perceptions of a giant amount of people, and that doesn't seem it doesn't seem like something that should be escaping the general consensus.
So there are
If I
many
could,
studies showing the effect of TikTok, and this article I shared in the chat kind of overviews the studies and insight in how the gratification of entertainment or the needs of the children or affection is replaced. And these behaviors are not only understood, but they are actively using the satisfaction rate and implementing the self-determination theory, which kind of disconnect the child from its surrounding or parents or caregiver and connect them and allow them to feel like that they are more independent, self-sovereign, and they can do things. But the algorithm that is able to control and show, for example, in China, the children can see, oh, I can do this science experiment and become a scientist, as opposed to here, they are shown other kind of things which are harmful. So many different theories that are psychologically manipulated are also causing not only addiction, but if you separate the child from TikTok per se, it can incite fear in them. It can cause anxiousness, and there's so much more that they are using there are many studies that are cited in the link I shared, so anybody who's interested can read.
I
Yeah,
have
I'd
a
like I'd
question.
like
Oh,
to
go
add,
ahead, John. Go ahead.
yeah, I'd like to add sort of a, um, if you will, a meta perspective, and a lot of these issues really can be distilled down to how do you engineer a governance process that ensures the safety of a population. And so one extreme would be to say, let someone in the private sector um, do it. That would be Elon Musk and Twitter, and others would say, let the government do it, and that could be the NSA or the FBI or the CIA, or pick an institution.
Or
And
the FTC,
I'm
John.
sorry, yeah, or the FTC, but yeah, of course, or the FCC. I mean, there's lots of candidates in different contexts, but my point is beyond that. Neither of those extremes is really ideal. There is no perfect solution, but what I would submit is that when you have a market that allows for both types of solutions in different contexts, it boils down. This is the distillation. It's who's watching the watchers. And so if you've got private enterprise assuming a prominent role, they need to be very tightly overseen by a governmental regulatory agency. If you have a federal agency as the primary watcher, then you need a non governmental civilian oversight committee. So it's almost like the genius of the Constitution is the balance of powers so that one can check the other. And I think what's missing in the discussion is the fact that either solution could be made to work in different political contexts, but the balance between the primary watcher and the secondary watchers who watch the watchers needs to have a sustainability feature in governance that allows those two entities to not become concentrated as one by virtue of who gets to choose who watches the watchers. And so I think this is one of the most fundamental challenges to humanity right now is how do we establish the kind of balance of powers that the framers of the Constitution put into the U.S. Constitution in the context of oversight of digital media.
Well, that's exactly why you need decentralization. I mean, you've just made a very persuasive reasoning for why we are, who watches the watchman is the question, and why we, as individuals, that's why we need to be part of a system whereby we can all be part of it and that it is all private yet provable. and that those attestations and the opportunity to provide those attestations come from the collective, and that the ledgers are stored by the collective, of the collective, and for the collective, and that's the use of the AI that comes from it. So you've made a persuasive argument for the fact that that has to be the future, because we don't trust any of the institutions, unfortunately, that are there to regulate our society, because we went post-truth in 20, sort of Cambridge Analytica time, and we went post-trust in 2021. And now people are actively, including rich people like Elon, saying my pronouns are prosecute Fauci is a major monument on the road that we've gone being post-trust, because he is publicly suggesting that the man who is in charge of a program of public health is actually liable for killing people. And that's what he's saying publicly. So
And I,
we
yeah,
need to
and I,
find a way to make sure that we have a ledger of truth, and that has to be publicly maintained.
and I that's the reason that I absolutely love what you're doing, Nicholas, and strongly support it. I think it is a central part of the solution set. I don't, I still don't believe that it is the entire solution, but I think it's a key element of a comprehensive solution.
I agree with John and Nicholas
Agreed.
twofold, but I have a question. So we're talking about regulating the tools, the app and stuff, which is essentially just a tool that people use to communicate. But what about the people who are creating the said content just to receive, likes, or, nowadays it is a monetary situation. So why are we not having this discussion about the content? Because we do have TV, which has different types of movies and different type of TV series that kids have access to. There's the radio where there's different types of music, with different words that, portray different type of environments, activities. We've seen music videos that do the same thing too.
You're
So
right. You're
why are
right.
we not looking at it from the content standpoint of these of the people that's create? Are we going to start going after these content creators then?
No, it's because the medium is the message. So, in every one of the examples you cited, there are regulators because there is a broadcast function. The complexity of social medias is they sit under Section 230. There's special rights was given to be a platform as opposed to a publisher. And so you don't get to regulate a platform in the same way you regulate a publisher. And that's why these questions are the questions that are coming up again. And this is why Elon's phony, he's doing like a fake news stint, but his point about free speech on Twitter is a weird one, because it's free speech which is monitored. He is the watchman, as John said. So our tools for participating in regulation and participating in society are shaped notionally by us if we actually cared to participate in the political process. But unfortunately, the political process is an expensive one, whereby the platform owners are the ones that go in front of Congress. And you've seen from Jack's two-faced talk about Twitter and Elon's behaviors that they have a very distinct viewpoint, and they have to satisfy shareholders. And so we need to figure out a way how to bring up this conversation and hold the corporates to account, because at the moment they're writing the laws. So that's the complexity that's in the system.
I
Well,
think it's
But
still on
I
the
Nicholas,
think it's
what,
same
worth
thing though,
summarizing.
because you still have, there's different types of TV shows. Or yes, there are regulators, but there's all sorts of different type of content. For years, there's been the
yes, but
argument
it's
about
regulated
Cosmo
at the choke
magazine,
point.
but
It's
there's still
regulated at
like,
the choke point.
but there's
So
still content like Cosmo magazine and other beauty magazines that you can see in the grocery stores.
right, but there
They're
are
in
laws that
libraries.
pertain to
Mm.
publishing and making. If you were to libel someone in Cosmopolitan, it's different than someone writing something on Twitter. So, and there's a
Uh,
reason for that. That's the law. I didn't make those rules. I'm just telling you because you asked the
no,
question.
I understand that it's regular, but it's still a content thing. There's still access to it. So,
No,
there
but
we
the
see as
publisher of
women, we see this stuff
Cosmopolitan
all the time.
can't publish. Yeah, but the publisher of Cosmopolitan can't publish libelous or slanderous, lies without having to take responsibility for
But
that.
they do put
How
harmful things up like
they they
women
they
in order
they
to
they
get your
may do,
man to do
but you can
this.
then, okay, I don't know about that,
Okay, finish.
but I'm just saying they have to take responsibility because there is a regulator for publishing, and there is laws around libel and slander. The laws that are evolving around social medias are being written by social media owners. That's the real, point, and that's the point of Elon aligning himself with a political viewpoint, is because he would rather be regulated by the people he's supporting, so he's supporting them, which makes sense. He is a smart man, and so
Could
he's
I
saying, I may as well advocate for my own interest.
could I try and summarize what I thought was one of the most fascinating parts of Chris Fornoff's forum yesterday, right after this call? And I think I mean, it's unfortunate that the session wasn't recorded. There was so much reveal about what's happening. So if Chris does another room on that, I encourage everybody to try and attend it, and let's get him to put the recordings on because it was just stunning. But one of the sessions, and it comes back to what Nicholas was saying, or or Ben, I have trouble differentiating your voices, about the medium's the message. And in that session yesterday, I alluded to Marshall McLuhan's famous observation that the medium is the message in the context of Chris describing how what OpenAI has done with ChatGPT is amalgamate all kinds of sources of information, whether social media or text message, whatever possible source of data. When you aggregate all that and operate on all of that, the ability to construct, as was alluded to earlier on this call, the psychological profiling of individuals, you get a truer sense of who that individual is and how they operate. And the reason I brought up the Marshall McLuhan reference to the medium being the message is that a person's projected persona is not the same on different communication media because they have different intentions of whether they want to influence people, just vent, rant, conduct business, make friends, pursue business opportunities with strangers. There's all different motivations that manifest in the same individual in different contexts of different media, whether social media or conventional media, pre social media. And so, the point of all this, in terms of trying to distill out some of what Chris revealed in his 16 hours a day for the past week. In working on ChatGPT to try and understand how it operates and try and trick it and then try and correct it and be corrected by it, it absolutely um, suggested that, and this is Chris's inference, is that Google is probably 4 years ahead of ChatGPT already, but because there's a constant back and forth with their legal staff about what data sources they have that would be revealed by how it's implemented and whether or not the sourcing of those data sources is something that they want to expose publicly. Now, I don't know myself the veracity of that observation, but if true, what we're looking at is the big tech companies that have access to, and this is another part of his conclusions when asked about what is the principal factor driving the differentiation and competition in the space. His observation was it's probably the chip capacity to be optimized in for machine learning and operating on huge databases, and the ability to fund the kind of training that's required on those huge databases. And to bring it back to the conversation today, I think what's really fascinating about Chris's observations is that um, the potential for these kinds of infrastructures, architectures, data sets, and paid services through GPT-like chat services is that not only can we help train it? Which Chris gave numerous examples of how he had trained it to give different responses as it learns what we're seeking, but it trains us in terms of how we ask and construct different questions in ways that reveal answers that are more what we're looking for. And so there's this iterative kind of training the machine and the machine training you how to interoperate with each other in what I like to refer to as the dietarity, with a human still in the loop of machine learning. And to the extent that the machine builds these enormous profiles of who we are and how we behave in different contexts and different media and different roles and the different personas within us, it is clear that the machine will have a better understanding of us than we do ourselves, or that our friends and family may understand us. And so, that one of the related discussions, and then I'll stop after this point. Sorry, and thanks for indulging. But the last point is that in terms of what differentiates humans from machines in the asymptotic approach to the singularity, and why I created the term diedarity to argue with the singularity being a thing, is that there's nothing the machine can't learn about us through aggregating all this data of how we behave in different contexts that can't emulate a human understanding. The remaining unique domain of humans, in my view, is the ability to understand how to communicate with people who don't share the same value hierarchy. And ancient philosophers have opined extensively on how to manage discussions and conflicts when the hierarchies of values are not aligned, because there is no such thing as a perfect set of values and weights on those values and hierarchies on those values. They differ based in different cultures, subcultures, microcultures, and members of individual families do not share exactly the same value hierarchies. And so, to the extent that there needs to be an exposition of those value hierarchies to help facilitate uh, discussions and conflict, um, uh, and a lot of what goes on in the diplomacy corps between nations that are at contest with each other, whether digital or kinetic or whatever. The ability of ChatGPT and that genre of technologies to actually expose what infer and expose different value hierarchies, so that you can say, oh, well, you put privacy above all else, whereas the other discussant puts security and stability ahead of privacy. Then you can start to see how people's arguments emerge from different value hierarchies, and by exposing that, actually facilitate diplomatic kinds of discussions and debates in different contexts. So I'm going to stop there. But again, if Chris ever has another room like that, I encourage everybody to listen. And it was very enlightening.
Okay, moving on. Next, Apple confirms that iOS 16.1.2, which is almost certainly what you have on your iPhone, released only on November 30th, a short 15 or so days ago. Um,
No, released yesterday. That was the beta that was released on the 30th.
it fixed a WebKit 0-day. WebKit is the browser, Safari, but also all the browsers, even Google Chrome, is built on top of WebKit, which is Apple's own thing. Anyway, so it's not even real Chrome. Anyway, WebKit had a 0-day flaw, which was found and reported by Google to Apple, because Google has to build Chrome on top of WebKit. And this 0-day flaw allowed remote control and was actively exploited. So not only did Google find out about it, but so had other people who were actively exploiting it. So Apple has confirmed that an iPhone software update it released 2 weeks ago fixed a 0-day security vulnerability that it now says was actively exploited. Um, a whole bunch of fundraisings. There's a law.
That's why it's important to keep your phone and devices up to date with the latest update that comes up. Mainly because there are tons of fixes that come. They fly under the radar. They're not popularized, but they do have issues, and a lot of people are actually weaponizing these flaws or zero-day issues that many things have. The browser, the kernel, anywhere. So just make sure anybody who's listening update.
A Vietnamese company called Gillamex has a lawsuit against Amazon seeking damages over investing heavily in manufacturing facilities before Amazon cut its orders. Sauna Labs, which happens to be
Sounds like they don't have a good contract.
um, yeah, the next one's from TechCrunch. It says it's new, and it says Sauna Labs, spelled Sana, which happens to be the company of my dear friends Joel and Anna from Stockholm, which offers AI-based tools for managing work information and creating e-learning resources, raised $34 million at a 180 million post-money valuation. Some of you might remember Joel from Sauna Labs, who I brought here in the clubhouse for when we were doing my monthly Stockholm meetups during COVID here in Clubhouse once a month, and we did one.
Does he run labs in a sauna or does he sell saunas?
Neither. It's what they do. Once I explain it, some of you might remember it. They basically are optimizing learning using AI so that you're presented with a whole bunch of basically the whole process of learning is somebody wants you to learn some stuff. Usually, a teacher wants a bunch of students to learn some stuff, and there's a whole bunch of information that needs to be learned. And the question is, what's the best way to absorb and learn all of those points of data? And with an AI, you could optimize for each individual which points of information they've already learned, which ones are unlearned, and everywhere in between, and create the optimum delivery mechanisms and patterns.
So it's personalized learning.
Personalized,
Is it personalized learning?
sure. So via AI,
Okay.
because the AI knows what you know and what you don't know and optimizes all that. That's basically what they've done. And they found out that rather than using the education approach with schools, that it works very well for them with nurses who are onboarding, and that's why they are focused on the enterprise learning side of things, where you're onboarding team members who need to learn all kinds of things. You could think of like a Starbucks barista has a big workbook they need to learn a lot of stuff about, and this could optimize that whole process and save a lot of time and have higher. They claim that their AI driven models cut the time in half and increase retention by 300%. Does that ring bells for anybody? Do you remember that pitch?
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was Joel from Sonolab.
So it sounds like they're doing well.
Yeah, they are. They've always been
Looking
doing well.
good.
Joel's fantastic. Anna's fantastic. I couldn't be happier for them. They're lovely people. And it says Menlo Ventures, the U.S. firm, is leading a round for Stockholm-based Sana Labs with EQT Ventures, who you probably heard last week, and no doubt her if you've seen any of my events. EQT Ventures is my dearest friend Ted Pearson, who he it just I couldn't be happier for them. They just announced a new $1.1 billion fund at my last event in November, and live on stage, and I couldn't be happier.
EQT is an offshoot of that Swedish family office, isn't
It
it?
is the Wallenberg family. That's right. Which is
Wonderful, wonderful family.
you could say that. They actually invest incredibly heavily in AI, perhaps more than anyone outside of Elon Musk and OpenAI. They've committed, I think, $300 million to create an AI arm of research in collaboration, I believe, with the Swedish KTH, which is the Royal Academy of Technology. And anyway, the Wallenbergs, like they keep a very low profile, and um, they walk with a big stick and a low profile. They're
Well, Raoul Wallenberg should be memorialized
he
because
has been.
he was a member of that family that saved many, many people from the Holocaust and disappeared himself at the hands of the Nazis. So whenever the Wallenbergs are mentioned, I like to give them praise
Yeah,
for the work of their uncle, I believe it was.
yeah, it's exactly right. And there is a memorial to Raoul in central Stockholm, next to the Berns Hotel, next to the right in the.
And in Los Angeles and in London,
Oh
all
yeah,
over the
I didn't
world, there
know
are
there were other
memorials
cities
too.
as well, but the one
Yep.
in Stockholm.
Yeah, and most cities where they have a large Jewish community, they have a memorial to
Did
Raoul
not know
Wallenberg.
that. That's interesting. Um, you can't.
Actually, he vanished into the gulag of the Russians, not to the Nazis.
Interesting. Um, but indeed, beyond impressive family, and the current two cousins who kind of lead the family. Um, they super impressive, very, very, very impressive folks. Anyway, yes, EQT Ventures is part of the EQT private equity family, and EQT Ventures has just raised their is that their second or third fund? This one they just announced, but anyway, they're Ted and the team there, Lars and everybody um, are doing a fantastic job. So congrats to everyone involved there. Next up is YouTube. Oh, by the way, Ted Pearson from EQT Ventures has popped in here multiple times in tech news, and he's rather soft spoken and doesn't say much when he is here. But I've called him out a couple of times as the main reason I even have anything to do with Stockholm at all is in a very large part due to Ted personally. So anyway, YouTube expands its tools to curtail toxic comments, sending users a notification when their comment is removed and temporarily banning them from commenting. Toxic and
It's called the naughty step approach to moderation.
toxic and hateful comments on YouTube have been a constant headache for the company creators and users. Yeah. Okay. What else? Verizon partners with Netflix to give customers who subscribe to another service using its new Play Marketplace a 1 year Netflix subscription for free. Okay. Activists, publishers, and social media users criticize Indonesia's new broad criminal code set to take effect in 2025 and its impact on online speech. Reuters says they have sources.
Um,
Hmm? Go ahead.
that Verizon move is very much similar to what T-Mobile did, just like I think last year or a year and a half ago, which is basically bundle Netflix with their subscription. But now T-Mobile have expanded to like pick your own service that we're going to pay for with your subscription.
Okay. Some Chinese students are using remote access software to cheat on U.S. college entry exams, fueled by the introduction of at home testing. Mm, mm, WordPress founder and CEO Matt Mullenweg did an interview with The Verge about closing the Tumblr deal, which he acquired for, I recall, he bought that for over $1 billion. If memory serves me. It was a very significant acquisition, anyways.
Isn't Tumblr one of the viable alternatives to Twitter now?
He's somewhat positioning it that way, anyways. Anyway, the interview.
And Instagram is introducing something to also compete on that arena as well. So when everybody sees like a weakness in what some companies doing, everybody's gonna rush in.
Um,
So, as you say, nature abhors a vacuum, and a vacuum is being
Yeah,
created. And I think that they are all going to try and build American WeChat. That is the basic aim. X.com is American WeChat, and this is the aim of all of them. And they'll do it with
yeah.
CBDCs. That's the game. So
Microsoft.
it'll just be a simple question: are you using the state system if you're in the Belt and Road? Are you using the one of the WeChats, American WeChats, or are you using something that is
The
decentralized and
enemy.
distributed and people powered? That's going to be the three routes. I cannot see any other way.
Yeah, isn't Microsoft trying to do that super app, but they were kind of denied from Apple Store, something recently about that. So everybody's doing that super app. Everybody wants to be doing,
Everybody
managing.
has to. It's the only route forward because you need all the information. Because if you can run those AIs, like what John was saying about Chris, AI is all about information. The more information you have, the better your AI. Full stop. And then you've got machine learning on top of it, and then you've got behavioral stuff, and everything is being directed via those mobile phones. And those
So my
mobile
money is on three
phones are
companies.
controlled.
Yeah, my money is on three companies: Amazon, Apple, and Google. I think those are the ones who are going to come up with something because they already have our data, they already have our financial data, and they have the software might to be able to produce something like that. Not Microsoft, but these three.
Microsoft, has a significant position in OpenAI Chat GPT. So they and it runs on Azure. So I wouldn't count them out of the contest.
And they have every business. I mean, look, it's very
Yeah.
simple. It's the entire technocracy who is either in Microsoft is the business, enterprise leader, Amazon is the consumer leader, Apple is the product leader for rich people, Android is the product leader for poor people, and Google is the operating system. So, or is Google is the search engine. And Tesla has to be added in now because of Twitter and because of AI. So those are the choices. They're just American WeChat. Just think about it like that. You've just got Chinese WeChat and the state. You've got American versions of WeChat, and they're all going to try and go down that same route. And the only question is whether anyone has a native token. And once they've got a CBDC, they won't need a native token, and they'll be able to do fractional payments. And then it'll only be about who's got the best payout. And my bet is the public payout should be the best payout. The question is, can you enroll the public?
I think we have to keep one example in mind, the recent example. And I thought, the Google would be the best position to acquire the home place, talk-in app like Google Home, Alexa, and all that. Now, because Google has all the data, they were well positioned to actually do that. But since Alexa was 2 years ahead of the game, the company we were least expected that would come up with the hardware. I mean, obviously that's like a marketplace. Why would they go in making the hardware? First, they launch a phone, which terribly fails, and then Alexa comes in. Now, when you start to interact with it, like in the beginning, I'm talking about like 10 years ago, like 8 years ago, it started to accumulate that data, which is everybody kind of like placing an order and all that. Like, why would you need a device which, interacts with you and doesn't tell you much, only about bringing in some information from the Wikipedia? But over the time, this actually performed much better than the Google device. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if, enough money is being thrown in, like for instance, Tesla, all that data, like which is just restricted to the actual vehicle itself, probably would be able to build that ecosystem, which is going to be actually better than some other people, which we think that have got the most data. So I think by taking into account that one of the companies which has just about the e-commerce at that time, especially, can come up with something which is much better performance and much better integration with all the devices, like the doorbell and the bulbs in the house and changing locks and all those kind of things, would be able to sort of like do a wonder, like which we are not expected to do from Apple and Google and Facebook and all that. So I think there's enough money is being thrown in and enough innovation is being there, which is entirely new thing, like in case of Alexa, for instance, that can be very well done. So yeah, don't put all your money in just Google and all that. Thanks.
Google would probably be in a good position to do this if they had the actual, home hardware to support it in a good way. The way I see it, Amazon has really leapfrogged everybody in this
Google
direction.
bought Nest.
Yeah,
Google
they have
bought
Nest.
Nest.
They got Nest, and that's probably the only good thing on their hardware list. But otherwise, Google and hardware, I don't think they're a good mix. Amazon, on the other hand, they managed to crack the code on that, and
What
they
about
are
Android?
so dirt. No, but they are so dirt cheap. That's the thing. Every time Amazon has like a sale, you get these Alexa and Echo Show and whatever for like $20, sometimes even less, and sometimes they're even bundled with something else. And now they have Ring and Blink and whatever, all these other brands that they are buying, and they're invading our homes in every possible way. So on the hardware front, I think Amazon is like ahead of the pack, and they're losing. By the way, this is what I heard from some of the folks. They are actually losing on that Alexa front, but at the same time, they are dominating that market. It's hard to go anywhere these days without finding one of these Amazon devices, and they're not even a hardware company. But now they became a hardware company, and they're everywhere. And now they also have this Ring security system, which is also going to be able to dominate our homes. They're going to know everything about us and even our intruders, and provide us with our Wi-Fi and everything. They are definitely dominating in the IoT of the homes when it comes to that kind of products, and it's very hard to escape that. Sorry, I'm landing my plane now.
Please don't buy web-based surveillance cameras if you can possibly help it. For your privacy, for your security, for the quality of the video, for the ongoing cost, just look at a system. If you want quality, look at a local-based system. If you don't want geekdom and hassle, go with Unify or something. If you don't mind being geeky and running crap software, then there's a million choices out there. But just really, I would strongly urge you, just do the calculus. A decent local camera uploads data 10 times faster than a web-based, Wi-Fi-based camera. You do not have the broadband upstream to have several Wi-Fi wireless cameras and expect to get good quality streamed out the house. It's fundamentally impossible. You don't have the upstream to do it. Please look
Oh,
at local
by the way,
camera
Or
systems.
two other
the,
options:
the,
get a
the
big
new ring.
dog and improve our societies so we're not worried about being burgled.
Yeah,
By the way,
exactly.
this new Ring thing is actually storing your videos locally, and they have backup power. So if the power goes out, it'll continue to function. They have backup Wi-Fi. It'll continue to be working for your cameras, so that your new Ring system or security system will still continue to function when it's disconnected from the internet and disconnected from your power. So
That's
I
good.
guess
That's
I guess they
Total,
excellent.
so
thought about
total surveillance. Total surveillance. That's exactly what we want. We want it to be working, even when we turn it off, even when there's no power to it,
Yeah,
even when
exactly.
there's no Wi-Fi. It's taking pictures of you, and it's
Yeah.
feeding it back to Uncle Jeff for your best interests.
they know better.
Okay, moving along. Next up is we covered the Chinese students using remote testing. Matt Mullenweg, the Supreme Court asks the Biden administration to weigh in on a lyric website called Genius in their attempt to revive a lawsuit over Google's alleged theft of their work, aka lyrics. Because now when you search Google for lyrics, Google shows you the lyrics. Are they stealing the lyrics from Genius? Is the question of the lawsuit. And the US
It was Genius's innovation, I think, is their arguing, because the lyrics are owned by the artist, of course, but the innovation
close,
of Genius, which really was genius,
almost the
when I really do like it. It's a great service.
yeah. There's like artists often sell the rights to their lyrics to other entities within the music business of sorts. Um, but close enough to summarize, yeah. Anyway, the interesting bit's that the Supreme Court is asking the Biden administration to weigh in on a song lyric website's attempt to revive its lawsuit over Google's alleged theft of their lyrics. Um, yeah, the point is that they don't actually belong to Genius or Google. So
Right. So Genius made a
right,
process for taking lyrics from songs and effectively enabling a
I think
karaoke track,
you know what I think.
lyrics alongside the songs,
Yeah,
and then they put details about the songs with sort of like a just for people who don't know the service, with the ability to then add meaning and discussion into what the lyrics are saying, and the artist would comment on, oh, this is happening at this time in Amy Winehouse's life, and the reference to this is this character or this person. And so it was quite a good innovation when, like, for me, when I was trying to understand rap music, I didn't understand, like, there's a lot of context to what's being said, and you don't really know what they're talking about oftentimes. And so Genius was really helpful to look at it and say, oh, okay, I see there's this going on between Tupac and Biggie, and this is going on, like things I wouldn't necessarily know otherwise. So it is a good service,
right. Well, the point
and they did invent it.
they also, I believe, part of the clever model is it's crowdsourced lyrics where they could be wrong and they doesn't really matter. Um, because the quote unquote official lyrics are often licensed through a company called Grace Note, which charges an arm and a leg for any website who wants to host any lyrics. And Genius didn't want to pay Grace Note for the rights to have online lyrics. So they came up with a clever workaround, which is like, well, there's nothing stopping random people from collaboratively crowdsourcing a page about the lyrics that they think the artist is singing about. And is that illegal for a bunch of people to get together and crowdsource what they think the lyrics are? They're not the official lyrics. So, and then add additional features around that, which Nicholas perfectly exemplified. Anyway, but yeah, why does the Biden administration need to weigh in on this? It's kind of interesting. I'm curious to see what they're going to say and why.
But it isn't the is it? It's not going to the administration. It's what's the? I'm not reading the articles, but why is the Supreme Court asking the executive? Why is the judiciary asking the executive
I don't know.
for its views on copyrights? Like that there must be a reason.
Right. Anywho, by the way, just cultural context. When Jason and I were starting out with Mahalo, we met with Google on multiple occasions, and on one of those occasions, I recall them suggesting, because we were building a human-powered search engine, and they said, "Hey, why don't you do all the song lyrics, because song lyrics are some significant percentage of Google searches, and Google would love to have a definitive source to link to, like Wikipedia, for lyrics." And there currently doesn't exist one. There's a bunch of random sites that have random shit. We'd love something of quality that people could trust, that we could just point to, and blah blah blah. It was kind of a trap though, because we saw what Google has done with lyrics. They kind of just hijack them because they perceive them as data or whatever, and it's kind of a messy ordeal. But that interesting that Google was actually suggesting to a third party to build this so that they could link to it, and in reality, they probably knew they were going to steal it or suck it into their board of information and data.
Hey, Nicholas, the answer to your question on the Supreme Court is this. It was already heard by the Court of Appeals in the Second Circuit, and the Court of Appeals ruled that, basically the parties don't have standing because they don't, neither one of them owns the lyrics, which is kind of amazing that was kind of Google's defense, because it almost basically makes them admit that, hey, not only did Genius, violate a copyright, so did we. I mean, I don't know, really, you could make that argument,
No,
but
just
I think the Supreme Court's asking the Solicitor General, who's that's the administration official who argues the administration's positions on cases before the Supreme Court. They're asking them for a brief, probably because they're probably debating whether to grant cert, whether they're going to accept an appeal from the Second Circuit. And I
so
think,
that's the really interesting bit. So
yeah,
what they're really saying is the ruling of the Second Circuit was that because neither of them really had a dog in the game, Genius, Rap Genius, as it was previously,
Right.
didn't have the right to take action against Google because they didn't have any rights
Right.
themselves. But that raises the question for the administration if we were talking about parenting. So this is why it's gone from the court. Is to say you need to find a legal basis, which is what they're saying. They found a legal basis under copyright law, right? Seems to be what it is, and the legal basis may entitle Rap Genius to say to give the administration the ability to put it back to the courts and say it does seem wrong that Google can take the work of others and have the right to steal that work because what the reason why Rap Genius, I don't know, or Genius, you know how it came about is that they found that the lyrics on Google were exactly the same and the comments were the same as
Right.
theirs, which is why they knew it wasn't Google just pulling the
Correct.
lyrics, right? So they were literally just directly stealing their content.
Right.
And so it probably is a question for the political, the executive to say, you know, at what point is the limit of Google, who have total power, to just take the work of others, especially if the work of others is the collective, if it is, about crowdsourcing information. So it's like, how easy is it for the technocracy to steal the work of everybody else? So I think it probably is a good question to be throwing back to the courts.
Well, that's why Rap Genius tried to reposition itself not as a lyrics repository, but as like a karaoke, some other entity, because they want to distance themselves from claiming to be a lyrics website because they haven't licensed the artist's lyrics from Grace Note. So, but you're right. Google's defense is, well, how can we steal something from you that you don't own? So, um, anyway,
by the way, Tyler, even if you were a karaoke site, right? I mean, you think of traditional karaoke. When you go into a karaoke bar, technically, that bar, because they usually put
oh yeah,
the burden on the venue,
oh
that bar is supposed to pay the royalties to ASCAP and BMI, as
yeah,
you know.
and it's not a minor thing. Karaoke rights collections is rather significant. So,
By the way, the music selection on most cruise ships is quite limited. You'll find them, they will take a few songs that are well known, but many others they will not have on their playlist because they have to pay royalties for that as well.
I don't know if it applies in international waters, though.
They got round it. They got round it in LA by having a live band. And I went to Koreatown often in LA, and they would have a live band playing the music, and they would just show up the lyrics.
So,
Yeah, but even if you're playing the music, okay, in a public setting, okay, and particularly if you're charging admission, okay, um, you have to pay and royalties. And by the way, there's massive violations of this. By the way, so like a lot of them go unnoticed. There are actually companies. There's one in Arizona that actually goes around looking for copyright violations, and then they basically work at the behest of Sony and the other labels, to say, hey, our investigators were at this bar, and then they come and they make a monetary demand, and violating music copyrights is a statutory thing. Once that they could show that you violated it, I mean, they could demand $150,000 per incident. They usually settle
and
for less, but I mean, it's a very big deal. It's a big deal for
and it
tribute
leads and it
bands.
leads and it leads to good business as well, because I know two businesses that were spawned because of that. One is a guy who used to make music just for restaurants, because as you'll notice in restaurants, you don't, unless they're playing the radio, you have that licensing problem, and so he made licensed music exclusively for restaurants, and he made a lot of money doing that. And there was another company that made elevator music when it was relevant, and he also made a lot of money. So
AI
these
is
laws
going to make
create opportunity as well.
So AI can do all that sort of elevator music that is, non-repetitive probably, but it sounds familiar. That's number one. Number two, if you noticed, most restaurants, they don't even sing happy birthday. They will have their own version of happy birthday now. Go whatever you want. They're going to sing someone's birthday song. They will stay away from happy birthday because they are afraid to get sued for singing happy birthday. They want the song that we all know.
Okay, next up is during a recent all hands meeting at Google, Google's AI chief said that Google is moving more conservatively than a small startup on AI chat due to reputational risks. And no doubt what he's referring to was from a question from somebody saying, hey, why is Chat GPT getting all this hype and attention? And aren't we Google? Shouldn't we be getting some of that? And
Yeah, Lambda.
which is their version is called Lambda, as Sam said. And the chief AI dude, I'm assuming it's a dude. I'm assuming their pronoun is dude. Said that we're moving more conservatively than a small startup because we have reputational risks to consider, which is true. That's a very valid response.
Nah, they're doing it because they've got their AI is so much better than ChatGPT and OpenAI. The whole thing is, if everyone knew how powerful Google's AI was, they would be throwing up all over themselves all day long and all night long, and they have the government, you know, giving them the proctological examination. That's the
Well,
reason
and
why.
and and that's exactly what Chris said yesterday. They're probably 4 years ahead of Chat GPT, but
Easily, and
they're
easily.
not they're they're not broadcasting that, according to Chris, because they rely on data sets that might raise some alarms,
Can
and
tell
that
you
so,
100%. As you know, the lead developer for our protocol was the former technical fellow, which is the highest level you can achieve in Microsoft and in advertising, and that's the big data. And he spoke very eloquently about how frightening it was, how the amount of data they were and the amount of information they were able to, and that was the inspiration behind him starting Varus, or being the founder of Varus. So, you know, they are way ahead. What you're seeing with ChatGPT is just Toy Town. Toy Town. It's nothing compared to Google, it's nothing compared to Microsoft, and it's nothing compared to Apple. Nothing.
and just for context, we've only, to my knowledge, had one tech fellow from IBM in this room in the past. But if you ever run across a tech fellow from Microsoft, Google, uh, IBM, Apple, um, they that's a very elevated position
There are
that
only
warrants
22 technical fellows in the history of Microsoft. They are
right.
superstars of capabilities. And when that individual tells you, be afraid, and starts building systems to protect you from his previous position, this is the right way to go. That's what made me feel so
Exactly
comfortable.
my point is when those people speak, you need to listen.
Okay, next up is
I'll post a video from back in 2020 of Mike explaining how he. I'll post it in this chat, but you'll see. It's a Twitter link, but you'll see him explain what he understood at Microsoft. It's a good video.
So TikTok is testing a new horizontal full screen mode.
Hmm? Of course.
Hold on, Pauline. There.
I'll make you breakfast.
Oh, Pauline's making breakfast, everybody. So,
YouTube now.
when next up, Brazil's central bank plans to launch its digital currency in 2024. IMF approved the model. Okay, when a female reporter tried Lenza, the new avatar AI creator, many of her 100 avatars were pornified, with 16 of them being topless. Her male peers got avatars of astronauts and warriors and the like. So the algorithm is sexist and racist. And what else? Um,
Well, I was in Chris's room for a lot yesterday, and one of the takeaways is it's not exactly a mirror, but it has a lot of reflective properties. And if the networked connectivity is anything mirroring consciousness and cognition at all in a very distributed sense, then of course we're going to get all of the biases that exist in people in a distributed sense appearing out of it if we look for it. That's all I.
but they shouldn't it have, at some point in the near future, it will personalize itself to people based on their values, right? So if somebody's, uh, I don't know, Scientologist, it'll probably include that in and factor that into how it engages with that user. And same with a man who's vegetarian CrossFitter, like it'll probably be conscious of that and not say things that would be offensive to vegetarians or people who do CrossFit.
Vegetarian CrossFitters are very, very sensitive to it.
Incredibly sensitive.
To gluten.
God knows. No, don't get me started on the gluten crowd. Um, the Meta plans to release something called Hasher Matcher Actioner, a moderation tool to help platforms identify terrorist or human trafficking content, free and as open source. So well done, Facebook, on making that available. And normally I would go into the tweets, but we're again 20 minutes over. Um, but did anyone have a super hot tweet since we met last time? So we'll do just 10 minutes on the tweet. If anyone had a hot tweet or saw a hot tweet since we met last time, I've got I've got just one, which is a non-invasive laser light therapy could improve short-term memory by up to 25%.
That's huge.
Sign me up.
Can we decide what memories to remember?
According to new research demonstrated by scientists at University of Birmingham in the UK and Beijing, called transcranial photobiomodulation. Register that domain. The treatment is applied to an area of the brain known as the right prefrontal cortex. This area is widely recognized as important for working memory. In their experiment, the research team demonstrated how working memory improved among research participants. Jesus Christ, my monitor's nuts. After just several minutes of treatment. What?
Well, and to answer the earlier question about can you select which memories to not remember, the same technology was reported over a year ago to be useful in deleting trigger memories and PTSD, so that according to that publication, they were able to expose the individual to a trigger of PTSD while applying this therapy and break the link between the trigger and the response. And if that is reproduced and sustainable, that could be a remarkable therapy for those suffering from PTSD. And just as a simple example, a lot of the Gulf War vets who suffered PTSD from IEDs, the bombs that took out their Humvees, um, getting delayed, by any sort of distraction in Iraq was cause for panic, and driving in heavy traffic upon returning to the U.S. became a trigger for PTSD based upon that stimulus response pattern. So, if this holds up, it could be remarkably effective for all kinds of PTSD.
Well, also think of, I know we talk about people in the military, but think about these children who are in America's concrete jungles where they're dealing with as much, if not sometimes more, when it comes to shooting and how to jump out of beds and crawl under them at night. So if this stuff can help them in their pre-teenage, maybe that could be helpful also.
Well, and there was an interview with one of the moms of a Sandy Hook victim, this being the 10th anniversary of that shooting. And she related to the fact that only recently, 10 years later, has she been able to drive past the fire station where she learned that her child had died in that attack.
Hmm.
Hey, if you could post that or send it to me in the link, I would like to read that, John. Thanks a lot.
It was just an NPR interview this morning, earlier this morning.
Okay, I'll look up NPR.
Okay. Prolonging life with 1 minute bursts of activity during daily tasks. Research to measure benefits of vigorous physical activity as part of daily living. Let's find the quote.
Tyler, did you guys cover the Wagner Group headquarters being attacked in Russia?
No.
Oh, okay. So you guys can look it up. It's the Wagner Group, which is a mercenary organization or whatever people call it, international security, whatever. Um, they're not certain if it was the Ukrainians this time, which they've hit other things before, but chances are. But deep in Russian territory, the Wagner Group's headquarters was flattened. And you can read an article or two. You can look at the Twitter I posted earlier. But, the mayor of the city actually says they doubt if anybody got out of there. And even he said that if someone got out of there, out of their headquarters, he didn't think that they'd be lasting very long. So, though
That
I'm mentioning that,
coincides.
wait, real quick. Though I'm mentioning that, think of the ramifications of that. Not saying that it shouldn't have happened, but understand that this is just getting escalated.
Yeah, that coincides with an interview published by CNN today with a defector from the Russian military who um, was in several villages where the Wagner Group um, delighted, bragged, and advertised the kind of absolutely heinous war crimes that they were committing per protocol, and that as they protested to the Russian military leaders about the behavior of the Wagner folks, whose marketing campaign is to say we're the baddest assholes on the planet. That the military commanders just shrugged and said, "What are you going to do?" And so this particular defector has is in an undisclosed location, having escaped Russia at great peril, and is very vocal about the fact that these mercenaries that Putin hired, and Putin disavows any knowledge of
They're
any
the
of this, of
SS
course.
of Putin.
Exactly, exactly. And he disavows any knowledge or accountability for this, and it's squarely on him.
Okay. Well, Ben has opened his room over there, Sustainability Solutions Showcase number 5. So have a looky over there, and we'll catch you all manana. Thank you, everybody.